Hi there YouTube, Mark Verrier here. This video was spurred on by the fact that a couple of weeks ago I decided to buy back my old Pioneer component, loose system component, stereo system, hi-fi stereo system that I acquired back in the day in 1988, 1989, and that is this one. The reason why I did this is the fact that I still have quite a fair bit of old media, old tapes, but also a ton of CDs, and the fact that these Sonos speakers, these Bluetooth speakers, the soundbars and stuff, or the Sony MIDI sets that we were using, just weren't cutting it for me anymore. I wanted to have that full rich stereo hi-fi sound that quite a few of us actually were used to back in the late 80s, early 90s, and somehow we just make do with convenient streaming of MP3, you know, the big rise of MP3, which actually have appalling sound quality and stuff. But yeah, that made the CD go away, made the album, made the record go away. And yeah, there's something about systems like this, that the technology behind it and the way it sounds and the aesthetics and stuff, that I really wanted to go back. I'll get back to that, but I thought it would be nice to just share my own personal audio and visual device history from back in the day. And I go back quite a bit. I was born in 1970, so the first experiences I had as a kid actually are from around that era. So let's take a look at the devices that I encountered, that I used, that led up to this beautiful system. Yeah, led me back to this system again. So yeah, let's go on with the video. Back in the day, my mom actually would make do with a Blaupunkt table radio, like one of these. I remember that she listened to that a lot, and she had some sort of cabinet with the record player in it, but that was only used when she had visitors. Most of the time she would just listen to one of these small pocket radios, these very small pocket radios, or that Blaupunkt table radio. Now my uncles, they were quite a fair bit younger than my mom. They had the most amazing chrome stereo sets, Akai, Pioneer, and they had these big headphones, and the stereo sound would just come into. I remember vividly very much enjoying their stereo systems as a kid. When we were visiting, I would just look at those. Ome Joop, Ome Hans, Ome Peter, you guys know who you are. But yeah, but back home we just had very simple devices like the Blaupunkt. My mom actually would record music on one of these old, and they weren't even hi-fi, old reel-to-reel open tape recorders that were mono, and she actually taped the microphone that came with it. She taped that to the speaker of the Blaupunkt and just set the volume of the Blaupunkt radio not too high, and she actually taped music on these old reel-to-reel. I mean, my mom, for the longest time, she had no idea of audio quality whatsoever, in sharp contrast to my uncles. Now, this all changed when my mom actually got a boombox, early 80s, perhaps 1979 or something. It was a Saturn III, and this is actually a photograph of a Saturn II, but it's very similar. And it had great stereo sound. It had an input for a record player. She had a separate record player. And we could tape a lot of the old singles that we used to listen to this on this device, and it supported chrome tape, metal tape, normal tape. You know, really great stuff. And you could listen to it with these fancy orange lightweight headphones that were all the vogue back then. But yeah, that actually was a big step up in my mom for getting more proper stereo equipment. Now, I actually was rocking some equipment of my own as a kid. Let's go back a bit to 1974 again. let go of my mom's history and what I could see at my uncle's, but let's see what I used when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, as a kid, of course, I listened a lot to my mom's stuff, my mom's records, whatever she played, she listened to the radio and stuff. And I was actually a big fan of radio. But we also had our own little suitcase record player. And this is actually a photograph of one similar to mine. And I used to play little Disney singles on it, like little Disney 45s. They came in these small booklets, like 22 pages, and on the back, at the back of the book, there was a little sleeve where this little small 45 single thing was situated, and on the A side was the story, like was told in the book, sometimes with a bit of acting and stuff, and on the back side were 2, 3 songs that actually came from the Disney movies. So great stuff, and I remember we were just operating that on our own, and we were very careful with it. So that was actually the first audio equipment that I actually consciously used as a kid. Despite the audio equipment my mom used, she had a great taste for music, a very broad taste. And she was always singing, making music, playing the harmonica. We had a lot of musical instruments back in the house. She had a ton of records, she had a ton of singles, and I used to play a lot of her music, 60s, 50s music. I was quite into that. But also, she got some more modern stuff. Oh, I'll have to show you. This actually is my first single. It's the Poppies with a protest song. It's actually a French children's choir that originates somewhere in the 60s. Protest songs, anti-war songs and stuff. It sort of resonated with me, I guess, but this actually is my first single. And it's an important single for me because I noticed that what they were singing I could not understand because it was French, and I was aware of English because a lot of the music that my parents listened to, pop music and stuff, a lot of it is in English or German, but yeah, this was kids singing in French, and I found that very intriguing. But yeah, this is my first single, and I just played it a ton. I just turned it grey, that's how we say it in, played it grey, that's how we say it in Dutch. You play a record so much that the shiny black of the vinyl goes away, and the groove is just cut out and it's all raw and grey. As we got older, my brother and me, and later also my sister, we had a desire to have our own radio, our own music playing in the attic room where we played a lot of the time. So my mom actually put one of these old tube radios. It's like a big wooden cabinet with some speakers and like a piano keyboard that had some presets. Yeah, an old tube radio which actually sounded not that bad. It had great speakers, had great bass. A lot of people actually hooked up the first record players they hooked up on those radios, and some of them were in stereo. This one was in mono. But yeah, basically this radio, we grew up and we grew out of listening to these Disney records. My sister, she's a bit younger, so she still was rocking those Disney records and the little speaker pickup, the little speaker record player. But me and my brother, we were playing with Legos, playing with Matchbox cars, and we actually would listen to all sorts of radio, all sorts of music on that big tube radio. And a bit later on I got my own stereo system. Actually the first song that I recorded was I Believe in Miracles by Hot Chocolate or something like that. But we have to rewind a bit because around the time when we were using this little record and we were playing the Disney songs, we also had a little tape deck, and it's typically one of these tape decks, that is also used with the Spectrum and all sorts of 8-bit home computers to store their games on. And it was like this rectangular shaped unit with a little set of keys. The red key was the record key, but you could only press it together with the play key, so not press record to record. No, you had to do both of them. It used tapes like these, and it came with a little microphone, and we were listening to a ton of radio, and we actually also were using the reel-to-reel, the big reel-to-reel thing that I earlier spoke about, but also a ton of these tapes, which my mom also had quite a fair bit of music on from her brothers who recorded the tapes on their big stereo systems, and for some reason my mom was just perfectly happy playing this music on that tape. As a kid, that was just normal. We just weren't aware of the fact that these tapes could actually sound amazing. So yeah, we were rocking this little deck, and we were recording a ton of radio shows. We had some music, and it had the most fantastically colored tapes, especially the BASF tape, the BASF tape. They came in bright red, bright green, purple, blue. I'll show you some examples, but those things were just amazing, very bright. And yeah, me and my brother, we recorded a ton of radio shows, our radio shows. We did interviews, we interviewed people, we interviewed family members, we sang little songs, quite embarrassing if you listen back to it. But these tapes, they still exist, and my mom actually, she played them a couple of years ago actually. So yeah, that's quite interesting. So that's a bit of an interlude, because I also wanted to have a stereo system, and actually for some reason, not sure it came from, I got this all-in-one stereo system, and it was a Philips one, or also no, it was very similar to this. I have no photos of it, but it could be a Grundig or a Blaupunkt. I think it was a Grundig. It was a Grundig. So, but it looked very similar to this one. It had a record player, and also one of these. Well, it seems like they just dropped in one of these cassette. You know, these little cassette players just talked about. They dropped it in, and you had this radio thing on the front. It just used tapes. You couldn't choose what type of tape. You could record the records, you could record the radio, and right up till my mom actually got the Saturn, the big boombox, and I got a feeling of the fidelity. I was over at friends' places, and I noticed that more was possible than just a small speaker. And I actually had a little Grundig pocket boy radio where I used to listen to the radio at night. I was a huge listener to radio, and I had this little pocket radio with a little speaker. I'll put a picture up here. It's a little Grundig thing. It ran on two AA batteries, and it only had a mono jack, but I rigged up an earphone to have sort of semi-stereo. It was two-speaker mono. But I wanted stereo, and I wanted more. So a family member somewhere, I got this stereo system, and I was rocking it. But yeah, in school a lot of people had gotten similar systems that I have, but some had the more high-end equipment like my uncles were rocking, and I really wanted to get some proper equipment, you know. And I just noticed that the tape deck had some faults, the record player, the belt was giving out, and my equipment just wasn't good enough for me anymore because it was failing. So I wanted to get something else. I had saved up a little money, and I was really deciding what to do, because buying new stereo equipment was actually very, very, very expensive, and with the odd jobs that I had, it was very hard to scrape it all together. But as luck would have it, one of my good friends, Roberto, he was actually getting rid of his stereo system. It was a Philips one. It was built in a rack. It was all in one. It came with a record player, a tape deck, probably two tape decks because he could dub, and a set of speakers, and it was just a very low-end system. We taped a lot of singles and records and stuff on that, but he actually upgraded to a proper stereo system. I believe it was Pioneer, not sure, but I bought his stereo set of him, and that was actually this one, or something very similar, because I don't have any photos anymore. That was around the time when middle school, junior high, comparatively high school. Yeah, I must have been 13, 14, perhaps 15. And I mean, that system had been played to death. I mean, if anything, Roberti was coding his Commodore 64, we would just hang out, code on the Commodore 64, copy some floppies, dub some tapes. I mean, that system was used, but it worked. And it was kind of reliable. So, and I got a good price for it, so I actually rocked that system for a bit, until I wanted to buy my CD player. And when I wanted to hook it up, and I got a Pioneer CD player, and that was this one. It's the PD4300. But when I wanted to hook it up, I noticed that the stereo that I had didn't have a line in. So it didn't have a proper amp, so I actually could not use my brand new CD player, and I had no money actually to buy CDs, but that was quite annoying. I mean, just about any piece of audio equipment used to have some sort of line in. You know, the old tube radio. I actually could hook it up over on my tube radio, but yeah, I just wanted to have something that just was a cohesive thing. I also wanted a tape deck and stuff, so yeah, I used to go to the to the shopping centers, and I used to browse the stereo shops. They were specialized stereo, audio, or visual shops. And I would just read a ton of these brochures and catalogs, and I used to just go religiously through the Pioneer catalog, because that was my brand of choice. I mean, I thought about Technics, I thought about Sony. A friend of mine had a Sony deck, but it didn't do Chrome tapes, and I wanted Chrome tapes because, well, people were recording CDs onto them. So I was just religiously searching through, you know, all sorts of. In fact, I might actually go through one of these brochures. Actually, the exact brochure that I was going through, searching out my components. Let's do that. Oh my, what has happened? Yeah, change of clothes. But before we go to the brochure, I wanted to explain a bit more why I wanted a CD player and a tape deck. I recorded a ton of music off the radio. That was what we did, and we used to play those things on our Walkmans, because that was a big thing back then. You know, the only way you would have a sort of portable sound is with one of these small radios, or with a Walkman and a set of headphones. Now, Sony's Walkman, the official one, was quite expensive, and there were a lot of cheap knockoffs that weren't as good. And of course, over a couple of months, we actually had some very cheap ones that just didn't survive. So eventually, when I saved up enough money, I bought this. And it's still, yeah, it's still mine. It has yellowed a bit around the edges. It's turned a bit green, but yeah, it had a radio. It had a tape selector, so you could actually select chrome, metal, or normal. And it had a mono and a stereo switch when you wanted to listen to the radio. Great stuff, AM, FM radio. It came with one of these typical Sony headphones. They had dark foam, and all the foam in these headsets actually disintegrated. And I quickly got this, which is a set of earbuds that originally came with a bit of foam, but a lot of people would actually wear them without foam. But these are the earbuds that are very similar to the ones that you find on the sports Walkmans series, and it was very handy to carry around in your pocket, and they still actually work. Lots of people had more simple Walkmans. This is actually one of Elise's old Walkmans, an official one, but only the tape control mechanism. No radio, just, you know, it ran off 2 AA batteries. And that was just the way to go about things. So having a CD player, recording CDs of your parents, of other people. There were actually quite a few shops. There was a photo shop, photo studio, that did wedding photos, but also portrait photos. And as a sideline, they would actually rent out a lot of CDs. They had a whole catalog of CDs, old CDs, but also the more modern CDs, new CDs, which were always gone, of course. And the public library actually had records and CDs you could borrow. And of course, we would all tape these. And if you had better equipment, you would tape them on TDK SA90 tapes, which were the chrome tapes. And you would turn on noise reduction, Dolby noise reduction. And basically, if you had a proper system, then they would sound just about as good as the CD, perhaps a little less dynamic range, but yeah, a lot of these tape decks, they actually provided an excellent way to have portable music. Now, stereo system, owning a stereo system for me was very important. I lived and breathed music. It was just something that to this day I can't live without. Music is very important to me. Sometimes people would ask, you know, this stupid question, what would you be able to live without, your eyesight or your hearing? And I think my hearing would be a lot more devastating to me actually than my eyesight. Really weird, because your eyes you can use to get around and stuff, but yeah, I get much satisfaction from these two things, using them. Okay, let's check out these brochures that I was going through, checking out which equipment to get, comparing and stuff. And actually it's quite fun, because I actually found some of these original brochures online. Let's go delve in. So this is actually Pioneer's brochure from 1988, and this is the Spanish version. I couldn't find the Dutch version, but the Spanish version is identical. Yeah, a very very stylish loudspeaker box, and of course a lot of women present. Now this was the high-end, high fidelity, alta fidelidad, high fidelity sound system, far out of any 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old boy's reach. But yeah, you can dream, right? So what I liked about the Pioneer brochures was the fact that they provided you with a lot of information. I was a kid who wanted to have as much information as possible, and I was reading up on computers. I was reading a ton of stuff, and of course I wanted to know about the systems that I was going for. It was quite a thing back in the day that these brands, these audio and video brands, they would have these elaborate brochures filled to the brim with all sorts of technical information. And it's not really audiophile technical information, you know, it's targeted at laymen, but still. And this actually explains how compact disc DA converters work, and I found that very interesting. I was used to my record player not being at a solid RPM. We replaced the belt, but yeah, something was just amiss. My tape deck, the head broke off a metal thing, and we had to repair that. But yeah, it was just not a very good experience, and CDs were just amazing. They were tantalizing. So yeah. Now of course, browsing through the brochure, the PD91, the high fidelity reference design, not for me, but yeah, something to dream about. I actually didn't like the wood and the gold actually that much. So yeah, and then you have the 93, the 73, the 63. Actually, the 63 was one of the players that, or the 73, those two were actually the ones that I wanted to go for, but they were just hugely expensive. So it was either the 5300 or the 4300, and actually I ended up going for the PD 4300, and it came with a little remote. Of course, I had issues with the audio, with the amplification. So what to do? Get a separate amp and a tuner? I was a huge radio buff, so for me the only thing would be to get a receiver, which is actually a tuner, a radio tuner, and an amp in one. Saved money, saved space, and it was just a sensible thing to do. So the more affordable SX335 or the SX225 were actually the ones that I was looking at. So I actually ended up going for the SX225. Yeah, these are the reference designs, and this explains how the amps work, the frequency range and stuff. Here you can see some separate amps, some loose amps, and here's the tuners. But yeah, I just wanted to go for a combination, so no separate tuners for me. That would have been double the price. And tapes. Of course, I had been using tapes ever since I was very young, using these compact cassettes. So tapes and the way they sounded and the way they could sound. I mean, on the Saturn my mom had, the tapes really sounded very, very good. I wanted to have a proper tape deck, and tapes and how they worked and how the frequency worked and how noise reduction worked. That was something that interested me very much. AX Pro, you know, techniques of recording, if you record FM radio, techniques to suppress the pilot signal, so you actually have a very nice recording on tape. Yeah, the reference deck, the 939, the 737. I recently acquired a 737 Mark II tape deck for very little money. You can scour the second-hand Gumtree, like we call it Marktplaats here in the Netherlands. You can have them for like 15, 20, 30 euros. Very cheap local pickup. I got this 737 recently, but it had some issues, wasn't recording properly, so I need to check the belt. It also the little mechanism that checks whether or not it's a metal tape or a chrome tape. There's something amiss with that, so I really need to revise that. So that's actually in a little cabinet. The 225, that actually was the tape deck that I ended up with. It was the only tape deck that I could afford. Actually, there's no tape decks below. So yeah, the most basic tape deck I ended up with. It worked for a great deal, but it wasn't the tape deck that was the tape deck of my dream. The tape deck of my dream was actually either the 737 or the 939, or one of the double tape decks. And one of the double tape decks that was in my dreams is the CTW55R. It's not in this catalog because they tended not to put every device in the catalog. The thing about the CT225 is that, I mean, it does everything that you want to do, but it doesn't have the nice little fluorescent display that quite a few of the other systems have. The displays in Japan and Europe of Pioneer equipment actually was green, bluish green, and the red. And in America they were actually different. We can actually check out one of the other brochures, the American counterpart. The thing about the CT225 tape deck is that yeah, it uses bright red and bright green colored LEDs, so it's a bit out of place. Just like the C335, it just doesn't fit the design language of the other systems. And I actually, as a kid, I was already very conscious about how things looked, and I wanted to have something with a fluorescent display. The auto reverse tape decks, yeah, those were magical stuff. And I actually recently acquired a double-sided tape deck, but originally I was rocking a CT225. Record player, my brother actually had a Pioneer stereo set, and he had a record player, and I actually recorded all my records on his tape deck, and I just kept my records as sort of source material to make tapes off, and I didn't play much of my records. I was totally fed up with records because of record player giving out, and I just wanted to have something digital. I was totally believing in the digital new world. So my brother actually had an all-in-one system, and he had this fancy graphic equalizer. So yeah, the GR555 on the left side was actually something that I really wanted to have, because the amp, the SX225, is a very low-end amp. You only have bass. You only have bass and treble to set, and you don't have any equalization. So if you want to change the sound, match your speakers, alter the frequency output, you really needed to have a graphic equalizer. And I chose the GR555. Almost got the one without the dancing thing. Yeah, well, the ultimate graphic equalizer is of course the GR777, but I don't think it's very prevalent. So yeah, I'm rocking the GR555, and that's it. That's good enough. That's good enough. Speakers, I never went for Pioneer speakers. I always went for BNS. And my brother had one of these systems, one of these racks, and not loose components, but one of these all-in-one systems. I got the headphones, and it was the SEA60 headphone. So not the high-end headphone, but a middle-of-the-road headphone. All sorts of technical specifications. You could compare, yeah, everything there is to compare, and I was just drooling over this. And of course some final flowers at the end. Let's check out the American catalog of the same year, 1988. The American catalog from the same year. And what is actually quite interesting is that the design language that they use in the American catalog is actually quite different. They have the same black matte finish, but the fluorescent displays are all yellow, orange and red, which is actually quite interesting. Yeah, video receiver. Again, a lot of information. So how remote controls worked, how you have to set up the sound field. Very interesting that in 1988 already Dolby Surround and stuff for the home was available. I thought that would have been much later, but yeah, it's all there. Yeah, a beast of a receiver, very nice stuff. The smart remote. Not sure if my low-end stuff is in here. Separate amps, separate tuners, digital tuners, compact disc players. Yeah, more high-end stuff. I guess the market, the American market, was actually a bit more. Oh yeah, the PD7100. That also was one of the CD players I was looking at, because it was also a bit more affordable than the other ones. And I didn't want to go for one of the 6-disc magazine changers, because it's a very big hassle just to put in a disc. You have to pull the whole magazine out, and yeah, it's just a weird thing. And yeah, if you do want to use one of these, the discs go labeled down in these. So tape decks, they start out with the twin deck. The design is a bit different. I personally like the blue fluorescent, blue-green fluorescent and red. I like that. I prefer that over the orange that they decided to use, and even the LED ones, the CTW500. They have the red LEDs and the orange LEDs instead of the red and the green ones that you find on the European and Japanese systems. Yeah, quite different tape decks. And yeah, in the American brochure, my devices are not to be found, actually. The graphical equalizer is to be found, but yeah, instead of fluorescent green, it's orange. And also the headphones, they're a bit different. So different markets. The Americans, they were catering for a different market with different desires and different likes. It might actually also be interesting to check out the hi-fi component of 1990. By that time I had already bought my equipment, but it might be interesting to check it out because the ultimate hi-fi system might actually still be in here. So yeah, different girl, same explanations about compact disc, a bit different because the design and the techniques have improved, of course. So you still have the reference design, you have the different CD players, different models. Basically they would focus on the newer models coming out, but you would have all sorts of subfolders that actually showed the other models as well. Yeah, models would come and go. Some are more prevalent than others today. And you see slight changes in the design. The disc trays, the front is a bit different. It's a bit more slanted, less straight, so more organic lines actually come into the design of these audio components. Actually quite interesting because a lot of the industrial design was changing. I saw the differences, and for me this actually is not the Pioneer that I want. I'm actually most honed on the 1988, 1989 Pioneer equipment because that's more straight, straight lines. Amps, integrated amps, and the tuners. Tape decks, the high-end tape decks, multi-cassettes, the double decks, the 550 that I currently have is still not in here, so yeah, it's just a snippet, just a few of the models. They had different brochures coming out over the years, so it was always nice to check out some of the brochures. They had seasonal brochures, so yeah, these are just a few. They would have more and different models in the various brochures, but it's actually cool to be able to check out these different brochures and that they're able to be found online. 2 years down the line, the SE A60 headphones are still available, and you actually see the more Walkman-y, funky colors coming in because Walkman was actually big. I mean, you would tape your CDs and you would use a Walkman to just have mobile audio. And there are, of course, here's the GR555 that just remained in production for a long time. I believe this also came with a price. This is actually quite interesting. So yeah, loose components were quite expensive, and yeah, you really wanted to be into music if you were going to go for the loose components, and yeah. I worked my ass off, and they were not cheap. They were not cheap. Now I believe that the prices for the reference systems, they are not listed here on this price list. This would be shoved in the folder, the brochure, weekly. Prices would actually change quite a bit, quite fast. Yeah, the high-end systems, they are not on the price on the price list. Actually quite interesting that it's not. So yeah, so in 1989 I actually got all the components together. The last bit is the graphics equalizer. The system that I got in 1988, 1989 is the SX225 radio stereo receiver, the graphics equalizer GR555, the CT225 tape deck, and the PD4300 CD player. And here you have a comparison between the 1988 price and today's price for a similar system, somewhat similar system. In 1988 I paid 1,400 guilders, which roughly translate to 767 euros and 80 cents in today's euros. And in 2020 for roughly a similar system, but then with a dual tape deck and actually including 2 extra non-functioning tape decks that I have to revise and 2 extra CD players that actually function, I paid 250 euros in total. Now, when I was still rocking the original system in May of 1998, I actually got this portable Panasonic portable CD player, and it could actually, on a vacation in the US actually, it came with rechargeable batteries, and you could actually charge the batteries from within this CD player. It had anti-shock, and I use it a lot with these headsets. The original headphone that came with it was a good headphone, but also the foam on the ear pads actually disintegrated and became all sticky and stuff, and I actually had to wipe this and clean this off, all sticky goo from the devices. And this cabinet in the garage, yes, I have some space in the garage as well, contains quite a few of the extras. This is actually the CT33-9, which is quite a high-end tape deck, but there's something miss with it. This SX225 receiver actually came from a smoker's home, so when you turn it on, it really smells like cigarette smoke. You can actually clean that off with alcohol. You actually bathe the whole unit in alcohol and let it dry off. But yeah, so I'm not going to be using that because that stinks up the entire room at the moment. But that actually works. And the CT737 actually also is not functioning properly. So these two tape decks I need to revise. And yeah, DVD player from Philips and a DVD player from Pioneer. So this is actually the accessory cabinet. There's a lot of stuff in there. And this is the old Walkman that Elise used to carry around. It's a very nice little set. The belt still is okay, so I mean it works. There's no tape selection. I believe this locks the lid. Or is that a tape selection? No, it is a mega bass. That's also something that the Walkmans, the later Walkmans, used. They had artificial bass enhancement. Now, this is my original Walkman from back in the day, the BF22, and it had a radio, and you could select the radio or tape, radio band, and here are the tape select. Oh wait, I'll turn it around because so here you can actually see normal, chrome metal, tuner, volume. So yeah, that's the old Walkman, and this actually is the earpods that still work, and you can actually put them in and roll them up very easily, and they held up pretty well. Very nice. And then a close-up of the still working Panasonic portable CD player. There's a lot of legal information. And it runs off two AA batteries, and this is actually the serial number, production date. So yeah, this is basically my portable audio range, and after this, yeah, we used phones. We used MP3 on phones. So let's go have a look at that amazing audio system of mine. So this is my system, and I'm doing a full video on it. So let's check out the first unit, which is the PD4300. It actually comes with a little remote, and that's the tray. It's a very basic model. Probably in a couple of weeks I'll actually have a more advanced model underneath here. The second thing is the graphic equalizer, which is a GR555, and basically that allows you to change the sound, change the frequency spectrum that is outputted to your speakers, to your loudspeakers. So yeah, quite necessary, I think, if you want to have complete control over the way your system sounds. And then the more advanced tape deck, the CTW55R, the auto reverse tape deck with a lot of functions. I actually got this cheap, very cheap, because of a flaw. And the flaw is actually that this recording level knob is actually an aftermarket knob, because all the Pioneer buttons, they have this little indentation and they're fully square, fully round. There's no ridges, and this has a ridge, but you know, you only notice it when I tell you. So yeah, you can't sell it as a pristine object, and well, that was actually very nice for me, because I didn't have to pay full price for a unit like this. So it has an auto reverse deck 1 with Dolby B, C, and then the second deck is a recording deck, and it has Dolby HX Pro, and yeah, both have auto reverse. And the counters, they switch between time and tape counter. You can do CD-Synchro. I'm actually still have to solder a cable back, solder a cable to just hook them up, because if you press CD-Synchro, then the CD player starts playing and you can record. You can do high-speed dubbing and normal speed dubbing from tape to tape, and you have all sorts of replay and reverse mode. You have timer modes, Dolby noise reduction, and recording balance, recording level, and these are the reset and time counter buttons. So yeah, very nice unit. And yeah, basically the tape deck that I dreamt about back in 1988. I had the CT255, but yeah, this is a lot more advanced, and it still works great. And then instead of the SX225, this is a more advanced receiver, the SX777, and it allows you to operate both speakers. You have 2 sets of speakers, and you can program in all sorts of presets. You can program in all sorts of radio stations. There's a loudness button. I don't have that turned on, but that actually is like a bass boost, bass, treble, volume, balance, mute. You can quickly mute, and then the phono tuner, CD, VCR line in, VC or tape that, tape 2 monitor, and actually that is hooked up to that. And if you have a second tape deck, you actually hook it up on that system. So yeah, let's look at the back of the system a little, because yeah, these components on the front, they look rather nice, but on the back it's actually quite different. You have all these wires hooked up. This is actually the antenna wire, and these are the speakers that are hooked up. And yeah, of course, I had a ton of pre-recorded tapes. And of course, I recorded a lot of my own tapes. This is the Four Non Blondes, Sinead O'Connor. And this, for example, is Love Deluxe Sade, For Every Heart, Twyla Paris. I'm not sure why. But yeah, I recorded this in 1992. And the one I've been playing quite a bit, but I also have the CD for it now, is something I recorded in 1994, and that's Björk Debut. And these are the more modern TDK SA90 tapes. And basically I used TDK SE90 tapes all the time because they had the best fidelity. Metal was just too expensive. But yeah, what we can do is actually we can, I had a whole stack of Epidemic Sound CDs. I recorded these. So these are burnt MP3, so it's not the, oh yeah, and the speakers, of course. These are BNS 80 watt speakers. Now I can, if I take out the tape, this is an empty tape, and I just press record. make the recording level in such a way that it doesn't oversteer. Okay, so I'm gonna press record and play. So that's actually going to record. It's going to record a bit of pause. This is the CD-Synchro that I now do manually, and then if the leader tape has been reached, I'll just press play. And we'll just record a bit. You can actually set the counter to seconds instead of a tape counter. Now, of course, this is recorded through my phone, so it's not really how it sounds. But I'll do just a close-up of the system. That's enough. Let's rewind. And let's press play. See how it works. Now this tape has been recorded over a couple of times, so a bit of a lead in. And it should start to play. Now, of course, if you play back, you'll see that the levels on the tape are a bit lower. Basically, this is just all there. You know, the frequency range of the tape is pretty good. I mean, of course, the CD has a more vibrant tone, but still good. And that's it. Whoops. That was a bit of REM, actually, I recorded on there as well.